A 71-year-old man lowered his average morning blood sugar from 147 to 118, not by changing his breakfast, not by taking a new medication, and not by buying an expensive supplement. The biggest change happened during the final hour before bed, while he was asleep, doing nothing at all. And if you've ever looked at your glucose meter in the morning and wondered, why is it still high? This story is about to make a lot more sense to you. His name was Robert, and when I first came across his story, what struck me wasn't that he was doing something wrong. It's that he was doing almost everything right, walking every day, watching his portions, taking his medications exactly as prescribed. Yet every single morning, his glucose meter delivered the same disappointing message: too high. He once told a friend, "I haven't eaten sugar in months. I've given up desserts. I barely touch bread anymore. So why is my blood sugar still high every morning?" It's a question I've heard more times than I can count, and maybe you've asked it yourself. Why does blood sugar rise when you haven't eaten anything for 8 or 9 hours? Why do some people wake up with higher numbers than they had before bed? And why does it happen even when they're following all the rules? The answer surprised Robert. It surprises most people. Because the real problem often has less to do with breakfast and more to do with what happens while you're asleep. So before this video ends, here's what you'll discover: why your liver may be working against you in the middle of the night. The overlooked organ that quietly helps remove excess sugar from your bloodstream, a plant most Americans have never tried, that's now catching researchers' attention. And why timing may matter even more than what you actually take. 4 pieces, 1 puzzle. And once you see how they fit together, your morning numbers may finally start making sense. Now, before we go further, one thing I want to be upfront about. Everything in today's video is based on real, current research and stories gathered from people who've lived through this. No miracle cures here, no overnight promises, no magic fixes, just practical habits that may help support your body's own overnight rhythm, the kind of small, steady changes that actually last. And if you missed our last video about the surprisingly common after-dinner habit that may quietly raise blood sugar overnight, it's linked in the corner and in the description. Today's story picks up exactly where that one left off. By the end, the way you think about blood sugar after dark may never be quite the same. Secret #1. The biggest lie about morning blood sugar. Most people think high morning blood sugar starts at breakfast. The truth? For many seniors, it starts hours before they even open their eyes. In fact, it often begins around 3 o'clock in the morning. And once you understand why, those frustrating numbers on your glucose meter may finally start to make sense. It's a question that comes up again and again. I skipped dessert. I avoided bread. I followed all the rules. So why is my blood sugar still high? Maybe you've wondered the same thing. After all, how can blood sugar rise when you haven't eaten anything for 8 or 9 hours? That doesn't seem fair. And yet it happens every day. Here's the surprising part. Your body isn't resting while you sleep. It's working the night shift. Think of it like a house preparing for the morning before anyone wakes up. The lights aren't on yet. The doors haven't opened. But behind the scenes, things are already moving. Your body does something similar. During the early morning hours, it begins preparing you for the day ahead. Hormones start rising, energy systems begin turning on, and your liver gets a signal to release stored glucose into your bloodstream. That's completely normal. It's supposed to happen. The problem isn't that your body is broken. The problem is that as we age, especially with prediabetes or insulin resistance, those signals can become a little too enthusiastic. Instead of releasing just enough fuel, the body may release more than it needs, and blood sugar starts climbing before breakfast ever happens. Scientists call this the dawn phenomenon. But don't let the name intimidate you. It's simply one of the hidden reasons so many seniors wake up confused by their morning numbers. That's exactly what happened to Robert. At 71, he was doing almost everything right. Walking daily, watching what he ate, taking his medications. Yet his fasting glucose averaged 147. Every morning felt like another setback. Then something shifted. Instead of focusing only on what happened during the day, Robert started paying attention to what happened before sleep. 6 weeks later, his average reading had fallen to 118. Not because he found a miracle, not because he stopped eating every food he enjoyed, but because he began supporting the systems that work while he sleeps. And here's where the story gets interesting. Robert's biggest improvement didn't come from what he stopped eating. It came from something he started doing before bed, something most people have never heard of. Secret 2: Why your liver may be working against you at night. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever gone to bed with a decent blood sugar reading, only to wake up with a higher one? If so, you're not alone. And the answer may have nothing to do with what you ate for dinner. It may have something to do with an organ that's been working while you sleep: your liver. Now, here's the surprising part. For many people, the liver isn't malfunctioning, it's overprotecting them. Think of your liver as a night watchman. His job is to keep the lights on while everyone else is asleep. Throughout the night, he releases small amounts of stored fuel into the bloodstream so your brain, heart, and other organs can keep running smoothly. When everything works properly, it's a beautiful system. Just enough fuel, no waste, no excess. But as we get older, those signals can become less precise. And that's when the trouble begins. Instead of adding a few logs to the fire, the night watchman starts throwing on the whole stack. Glucose keeps entering the bloodstream even when there's already plenty there. The next morning, you're left staring at a number that doesn't seem to make any sense. You blame dinner, you blame dessert, you blame yourself, but sometimes none of those are the real problem. This is what happened with Linda. At 68, she had recently been told she was pre-diabetic. What frustrated her most wasn't what happened during the day, it was what happened overnight. Several mornings a week, she'd wake up to numbers she couldn't explain. So she started cutting things out. First dessert, then bread, then fruit, then more foods she enjoyed. Yet the spikes kept coming. Eventually she put it into words, the way many people in her situation do. I feel like I'm failing. But Linda wasn't failing. She was fighting a battle she didn't fully understand. Once she learned what was happening overnight and started supporting her body's nighttime systems instead of endlessly restricting food, something changed. Within a few weeks, her mornings weren't flawless, but they were quieter than they'd been in a long time. And for Linda, that quiet was the first thing that felt like progress. And perhaps more importantly, she stopped blaming herself. Because she finally understood something powerful. Your liver is not your enemy. It's trying to help. The problem is that the messages guiding it aren't always as clear as they once were. And when those messages improve, morning numbers often begin to make more sense. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because your liver isn't the only organ influencing blood sugar while you sleep. There's another one quietly working in the background, and most people have no idea it's involved at all. Secret Strateg 3: The surprising organ that helps remove extra sugar. Let me ask you something. What if one of the most important organs involved in blood sugar control isn't the pancreas, and isn't the liver either? Most people never guess the answer. In fact, when this comes up in conversation, most people look genuinely surprised. George certainly did. George was 74 years old and had struggled with elevated fasting blood sugar for years. But what bothered him most wasn't the number on his glucose meter. It was waking up 2 or 3 times a night to use the bathroom. Like many seniors, he assumed it was simply part of getting older. End of story. Nothing to think about, nothing to question. But what if your body is trying to tell you something? That question changed the way George looked at his health, and it brings us to an organ almost nobody talks about when discussing blood sugar: your kidneys. Now here's the surprising part. Your kidneys do much more than filter waste. Think of them as your body's cleanup crew, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, quietly working in the background. Most of us never notice them until something goes wrong. Under the right conditions, the kidneys can also help remove excess glucose from the bloodstream. Think of them as a built-in overflow valve. When blood sugar rises too high, they can help move some of that excess sugar out of the body. It won't fix the underlying problem on its own, but it's one more system quietly working in your favor. And here's the twist: many people never hear. Several of today's diabetes medications work by helping the kidneys do more of what they were designed to do all along. Not by creating a new system, by supporting an existing one. That's why blood sugar management isn't really about one organ, or one food, or one supplement. It's about helping multiple systems work together: the liver, the kidneys, the muscles, even the quality of your sleep. George eventually improved his evening habits, reduced late-night snacking, and focused on supporting those systems instead of fighting them. A few weeks later, the wild swings started to disappear. His numbers still moved, They just stopped surprising him. And for the first time in years, he felt like he understood what his body was doing. That's powerful, because understanding removes fear. And once you understand the system, you can start supporting it. Which brings us to something researchers have been paying closer attention to in recent years. A plant most Americans have never tried. A plant that appears to support more than one of the systems we've talked about today. And that may be exactly why it's catching so much interest. Secret Stag 4, the bedtime drink, most people have never heard of. Now we finally come to the part of Robert's story everyone asks about. What changed? What helped his morning numbers fall from 147 to 118? The answer wasn't another restrictive diet. It wasn't cutting out more foods, and it certainly wasn't starving himself. Instead, it began with a simple bedtime routine built around 3 ingredients. And the first one may surprise you. Ingredient #1. Moringa, the plant most Americans have never tried. Let me ask you a question. How often do you hear about a plant that appears to support the liver, healthy glucose metabolism, and overall metabolic function at the same time? Most people don't. That's exactly why researchers have started paying closer attention to moringa. Not because it's trendy, not because it's exotic, because it seems to support several of the systems we've already talked about today: the liver, blood sugar regulation, the body's ability to use fuel efficiently. Think of moringa as a support crew rather than a single-purpose tool. Instead of helping just one pathway, it appears to help several systems work together more smoothly. Some early research has looked at moringa in people with type 2 diabetes and found encouraging changes in fasting glucose markers over time. That's not a miracle, but it is encouraging, and it's exactly the kind of early evidence worth keeping an eye on. Carol's story is a good example. She was 72 and frustrated by unpredictable morning readings. Some mornings looked fine, others didn't. There seemed to be no pattern. After several weeks of adding moringa to her evening routine, she noticed something she hadn't experienced in years: consistency. The spikes became less dramatic. The roller coaster began to settle down, and for many people, consistency is where confidence returns. If you decide to try moringa, look for pure leaf powder without added sugars or fillers. We'll use it later in the bedtime ritual. But first, let's talk about an ingredient that's probably already sitting in your kitchen. And most people are using the wrong kind. Ingredient #2. Ceylon cinnamon. Not all cinnamon is the same. When most people hear the word cinnamon, they think of cookies, or pie, or the holidays. Very few think about blood sugar. But here's something most people don't know. Not all cinnamon is created equal. The variety most often studied for metabolic health is Ceylon cinnamon, sometimes called true cinnamon, and that distinction matters. Think of it this way: calling all cinnamon the same is a bit like calling every car a luxury vehicle. They're not identical, and they don't perform the same way. Some studies suggest that compounds in Ceylon cinnamon may help the body respond more effectively to insulin. In plain English, it may help your cells become better listeners when blood sugar needs somewhere to go. Harold's story shows what that can look like day to day. He loved sweets. His wife joked that no pie was safe around him. Yet after making a few simple changes and adding Ceylon cinnamon to his evening routine, he noticed something interesting. Some mornings were still higher than others, but the spikes that used to catch him off guard, those became fewer and farther between. And when you're managing blood sugar, steady often beats dramatic. If you decide to use cinnamon regularly, make sure the label specifically says Ceylon cinnamon. That small detail matters. Now let's move to the final ingredient, and this one is the most surprising of the 3. Ingredient #3. Turmeric, the hidden link most people overlook. Most people think turmeric is just a spice, something that adds color to food. But researchers became interested in turmeric for a completely different reason. Its active compound, curcumin. Why? Because inflammation and blood sugar often travel together. Think of inflammation like static on a telephone line. The more static there is, the harder it becomes for messages to get through clearly. Your body works the same way. When inflammation rises, communication inside the body can become less efficient, and blood sugar regulation may become more difficult. That's where turmeric becomes interesting. Not because it directly lowers blood sugar, but because it may help create a healthier environment for those signals to work properly. Barbara's experience is a good illustration. At 75, She wasn't focused on chasing perfect numbers. She wanted more energy, more stability, more good days than bad ones. Several weeks after adding turmeric to her evening routine, she noticed something unexpected. The first improvement wasn't on her glucose meter. It was in how she felt. She woke up with more energy, more momentum, and less of that feeling that the day was already working against her. One practical note: turmeric works best when paired with a small pinch of black pepper. Think of black pepper as the key that helps unlock turmeric's full potential. A tiny detail, but sometimes tiny details create meaningful results. Now here's what's fascinating. Moringa supports multiple metabolic systems. Ceylon cinnamon helps support healthy blood sugar balance. Turmeric helps support a healthier internal environment. 3 ingredients, 3 different jobs, one simple goal: supporting what happens while you sleep. But here's the twist. The ingredients themselves may not be the most important part, because many people focus on what to take, when the real question is, when should you take it? Secret #5. Why timing matters more than dosage now. This may be the most important idea in today's entire video, and it has very little to do with what you're taking. It has everything to do with when you're taking it. Most people ask, what should I take for blood sugar? Almost nobody asks, when should I take it? And that may be one of the biggest mistakes people make. Let me show you why. Imagine mailing an important letter after the post office has already closed. There's nothing wrong with the letter, nothing wrong with the address, but it misses the window when it can actually do its job. Your body works much the same way. The right support at the wrong time may be far less effective than the right support at the right time. Now here's the twist. Most people think tomorrow's blood sugar is determined by tomorrow's breakfast. But for many seniors, tomorrow morning begins tonight. That one idea changed everything for Susan. She was 73, and like many people, she focused almost entirely on food. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, calories, carbohydrates, portion sizes. She paid attention to all of them. Yet her morning numbers still seemed unpredictable. Then the question shifted. Instead of asking, what am I eating? It became, what is my body doing before sleep? That changed everything. There was no single dramatic turning point, just mornings that, one by one, started making a little more sense than the ones before. She put it simply, for the first time, I feel like I'm working with my body instead of fighting it. That's a line worth remembering, because that's exactly what healthy aging is about. Not fighting your body, working with it. Here's why. During the final hour before sleep, your body begins changing gears. Think of it like a town preparing for the night. The stores begin closing, the traffic slows down, the streetlights come on. Everything starts shifting into a different mode. Your body does the same thing. The nervous system starts relaxing, repair processes become more active, and the systems that influence overnight blood sugar begin preparing for the hours ahead. That's why timing matters. You're not simply taking ingredients, you're supporting your body during the exact period when tomorrow morning is being built. Think about that for a moment. Not at breakfast, not when you wake up, not after you see the number on the glucose meter. Before all of that, tonight. That's why timing mattered for Robert, for Linda, for George. Understanding what their bodies were doing overnight was the turning point in all 3 stories. And that same timing is exactly what shaped the bedtime routine that helped Carol, Harold, and Barbara. Because it isn't just about ingredients. It's about working with your body's schedule instead of against it. And once you understand that, the next step becomes surprisingly simple. Here's the exact 5-minute bedtime ritual behind all 6 of their stories. Because this is where everything we've talked about today comes together. The 5-minute blood sugar reset ritual. Now let's put it all together. Not a complicated program. Not a dozen rules. Just 5 quiet minutes before bed. Margaret laughed the first time she heard this routine. She was 76 and said, "This sounds far too simple to work." 6 weeks later, she wasn't laughing anymore. Her sleep was better. Her mornings felt steadier. And perhaps most importantly, she felt back in control. That's the power of a routine you can actually stick with. Let's walk through it together. Step 1. Dim the lights. About 30 to 60 minutes before bed, begin lowering the lights around you. Turn off harsh overhead lights. Use a lamp if you have one. Let the room become a little quieter, a little softer. Think of this as telling your brain the day is ending, because your brain pays attention to light. Bright light says, stay awake. Dim light says, It's time to slow down. And remember, tomorrow morning begins tonight. This is where that process starts. Step 2. Take 10 slow breaths. Now pause for a moment. Sit comfortably. Place both feet on the floor. Take a slow breath in, then slowly let it out. Repeat 10 times. That's all. No special technique, no complicated method. Just breathing. Think of these breaths as a message to your nervous system. The day is over. You can relax now. Many people underestimate how much stress affects blood sugar. When stress rises, the body prepares for action. When calmness rises, the body prepares for recovery. These 10 breaths help start that transition. Step 3. Prepare your evening drink. Now it's time for the drink. Simple, affordable, easy to remember. In a mug of warm water or caffeine-free herbal tea, add 1 teaspoon moringa powder, 1/2 teaspoon Ceylon cinnamon, a small pinch of turmeric, a small pinch of black pepper. Stir slowly. Sip slowly. No rush. This isn't medicine. It's a ritual, a signal that the busy part of the day is over and the recovery phase is beginning. Step 4. Sit in quietness. This may be the most overlooked step, and perhaps the most powerful. After you finish your drink, don't immediately reach for your phone. Don't turn on the television. Don't start scrolling. Instead, sit quietly for a few minutes. Maybe reflect on your day. Maybe say a prayer. Maybe simply enjoy the silence. Most people spend their entire day surrounded by stimulation, noise, screens, notifications. Your body settles best when those signals finally become quiet. Even a few minutes of stillness can make a difference. Step 5. Go to bed freeing, and that's it. No expensive equipment, no complicated schedule, no endless list of instructions. Just sleep, allowing your body to do what it was designed to do. Repair, restore, reset, night after night. One evening won't change everything, but consistency can. And that's the point. Not perfection, consistency. Because the best health habits aren't the ones that impress people, they're the ones you can still see yourself doing 6 months from now. So tonight, try it. Just once. 5 minutes. That's all. Because meaningful change rarely begins with something dramatic. More often, it begins with something small. A dimmer light, a slower breath, a warm cup in your hands, and one simple decision to support your body before you close your eyes. And remember this, 5 minutes tonight may help shape tomorrow morning. The 30-day morning number challenge. Before we finish, here's a simple invitation. Not for one night, not for one weekend, for the next 30 mornings. Because one of the biggest mistakes people make with blood sugar is judging themselves based on a single number. One reading, one frustrating morning, one result they don't like, and then they decide nothing is working. But your body doesn't change in a day. It changes through patterns, through consistency, through small actions repeated over time. So here's one sentence worth remembering. Don't judge one morning. Track 30 mornings. For the next 30 days, try becoming curious instead of critical. Every morning, before breakfast, before coffee, before checking the news, write down your fasting blood sugar. That's it. No complicated app, no spreadsheet, just a notebook. One number, one morning at a time. Week 1, don't look for improvement yet. Look for understanding. You're gathering information, like a scientist. No judgment, no frustration, just observation. Week 2, this is where many people begin noticing something interesting. Not dramatic changes, patterns, a slightly lower average, fewer surprises, a little more consistency. And consistency is often the first sign that your body is responding. Week 3. This is when confidence often starts replacing frustration. The numbers begin telling a story. You stop feeling confused. You start seeing patterns. And so many people in this community describe feeling more in control than they have in years. Week 4 now. Look back at where you started. Compare your averages. Compare your trends. Compare how you feel when you wake up. Ask yourself, are the surprises becoming less frequent? Do the numbers make more sense? Do you feel more in control? Because that's the real goal. Not perfection, progress. And here's something worth noticing from the stories shared throughout this series. The people who improve aren't always the people who make the biggest changes. They're often the people who stay consistent long enough to see results. So if you're willing to take this challenge, join the community below. In the comments, tell me your fasting blood sugar number this morning. Just the number. Then come back in 30 days and tell us what happened. Not because we're chasing perfection, because we're tracking progress. And you may be surprised by how many people are walking this same path alongside you. Sometimes the encouragement of others makes all the difference. And who knows, 30 mornings from now, you may be looking at a very different story, one number at a time.